Hello, and welcome to the role of the AV professional in future UCC landscapes. This is an Ask Away session. That means it's your chance to ask our expert panel anything about today's subject. While our panel introduces themselves, I encourage you to contribute and upvote questions using the Q&A window tab to the right of the screen. Our panelists will answer as many of the top questions as time allows. Now, please welcome Brad Grimes, Nick Nienaber, and Julian Phillips from AVISPL. And gentlemen, if you would please introduce yourself.
Hey, Chuck. This is Brad Grimes. I'm Avixa's editor-at-large, the former communications director. I miss seeing you all at InfoComm, but I look forward to seeing everybody again there soon. And I'm really pleased to be here with Julian and Nick.
Thank you, Brad. Hello, everyone, to InfoComm Connected. It's the second best thing to being in Vegas right now. So, Julian Phillips, formerly of Whitlock, and now SVP for Global Workplace Solutions at AVISPL. More on that later.
Hey, everybody. Nick Nienaber with WeWork. I am the head of audiovisual infrastructure and also the director of unified communications and collaboration.
So I guess I'm playing moderator the moderator in one way or another. But basically, it's great to be here with Julian and Nick. They bring two points of view on this subject. Julian from the integrator side, and Nick from the side of what we often call the end user in our AV industry lexicon. As we all know, earlier this year, societies shut down in the interest of health and safety. The ways people commonly met and worked and collaborated almost instantly changed. And all those spaces that this industry's been so expert at outfitting with technology, conference rooms, huddle spaces, just went dark. Everyone retreated to their home offices, their living rooms and kitchen tables, turned to online technologies like the one we're using this week to communicate and collaborate. So they're out of the spaces where AV professionals usually perform and using UCC in a million different private spaces that AV pros haven't usually reached. So our questions today are, what's this industry's role? What can integrators be doing? What can tech managers who AV enable workers in many industries do to support in what will probably be a very different UCC workflow for a long time. So I've got a few questions and I'll jump in here and there too. And then Chuck's going to be fielding questions from y'all. And we look forward to getting to as many of them as we can. So I just want to start by throwing this one out. Basically now that meeting spaces have come to include individuals' personal spaces and the use of technologies like Teams and Zoom have proven to work well. Julian, what does an AV integrator play in the application of UCC? What is an integrator? How do they influence the experience and add value in this new sort of paradigm?
Well, thanks, Brad. Well, first of all, many AV integrators around the world have been playing a very valuable role over the last few weeks to actually help support customers as they dramatically had to increase the amount of remote participation. So that role is already being played and being played very, very well. We all have benefited from the use of video. There's no doubt about that. And I think certainly over the last few weeks, we've seen the validation of video as an application in the enterprise. That's not going to go away. But I think it is important that we don't confuse video as a very powerful application with UCC, which is Unified Communication and Collaboration. That's a lot of a broader topic. And I think when we start to try and understand the role of an AV integrator, we need to just think historically where we've come from and where we're headed to. So the AV industry, as far as the corporate application of AV is concerned, has been very much grown through the application of moving to a client-server architecture within the enterprise. We moved to putting data onto networks, onto devices such as laptop computers, and therefore we had to build conference rooms and spaces to support that particular model. And we benefited as an AV industry as a direct result. And if you like, in many ways, what a lot of people think the golden age of AV grew up in that period. What we've seen over the last few years is that migration from that client server architecture into cloud computing. And that has fundamentally changed the way we think about unified communication, collaboration, and technology workflow overall. And so COVID didn't create this situation. This is something that's already been going on for quite some time. And AV integrators the world over have already been playing a significant role in that. So one of the things I can tell you is that pretty much every organization that has been going into a UCC deployment, wherever they are in their journey, in the last few weeks, we've heard they are accelerating. They are moving forward. So maybe some have been partially through Microsoft Teams. It's now we need to accelerate, go faster. Or it's Google or whatever platform they're choosing. Now, clearly Zoom has played a role, but let's remember Zoom is a video application and it can integrate into that. It's not a platform in its own right. Well, there may be plans, who knows? So so the crucial question, what role does an AV integrator play? Well, here it is. It's the same exact role we've been playing over the last 30 years. Because what does AV do? We look after how we get content to share it to people. We ensure that people's voices are heard. We ensure that people's faces and their visual identities can be shared. And we do that in real time. We don't do it in near time, we do that in real time. And that's the skill set that we've had. And that's the skill set that is just as relevant in the cloud, fully integrated UCC world. And therefore, I'm very encouraged and very excited by the role that AV integrators have moving forward. And in fact, order books should be filling up right now. There's no doubt about that at all.
All right, thanks, Julian. Before I start fishing from Chuck some new questions, Nick, I just wanted to ask you, because you have two sets of customers. You have your employees and you have WeWork clients. Similarly, how does this new sort of remote dynamic impact how you and WeWork support your customers and then your employees, and who are you spending most of your time with to ensure good communication and collaboration?
Great question. Honestly, within WeWork, and I think this is a trend that you've seen in AV in general, we recognized some time ago that operation costs being what they are, that we needed to try to run with a leaner team and support a big fleet and a geographically diverse fleet with a few people, and typically people who are concentrated in one or two cities. So we started adapting without knowing we were adapting to this world a few years ago by making sure every system that we designed and installed or signed off on was remote supportable, that first line of support was always going to be a network check, was always going to be a login on the device, that as much as possible, these devices could be monitored, managed, and even deployed remotely without, with as few touches by a human being as possible. So in a way, we were ahead of the curve there. Where we were behind the curve is video conferencing is a service that is easiest to support in an enterprise environment. It doesn't, all of our favorite things about VC as a platform kind of fall apart in a bring your own device or in a do-it-yourself sort of atmosphere. So we have yet to formally offer video conferencing services to our members in the co-working segment. We do it for enterprise members. If they come to us and say, this is our standard, we are a Zoom shop, we are a WebEx shop, we know exactly how to design that system for you. If it is a co-working space where we have to assume that the same room might be used by a WebEx customer, a Hangouts customer, a Google Meet customer, a Zoom customer, and maybe somebody who wants to do their calls on Discord or Slack, then all the great tools that we know make video conferencing easy kind of fall apart. So who I've been spending most of my time with is my team, engineers who know our systems the best, is sort of a review of what we have out there, what's the quickest way we can adapt what's already installed to provide more remote on-ramps and more pathways for remote collaboration. And then also with partners, with people like Julian, with our consultants and our partners who are generally more aware than we are of trends in the marketplace and sort of what's coming up and what people are going to be relying on in the next couple of years. And then, of course, also with my support teams, not just my engineers, but member support, customer support, technical support, everybody who actually hears from the end user what the problem is. Those people are more important than ever right now to make sure that we're designing in a rational way that helps people.
Chuck, we got questions coming over the ether yet?
Yes. A couple of questions. So, how does the on-site AV professional get more say in the design, around the conference rooms instead of an interior design company?
Do you mind if I pick that one up, Brad?
Yeah, go right ahead, Julian.
I think one of the things that we have learnt, not just in the last few weeks, but we've been learning this for quite some time, is that try to actually understand what it is that we're actually helping people to do. And that's not necessarily just a technology conversation. And what we're trying to do, and by the way, I do believe that we are going to go back to offices and we are going to gather together, and with all of these things are going to happen again. There may be some rule changes, there may be some short-term things we have to do, but this isn't the end of the office in any shape or form. But it may be the redesign of the office. But one of the things is absolutely certain is that as we are looking at workspace and furniture and interior design, technology now has to be a fundamental and integrated part of that design. Historically, we've developed in silos, we've designed in silos, we've designed the building ahead of everything, then we've gone and designed the interior, we've designed the physical IT architecture, and as most of us in the AV world know, we're the ones that come in at the end and have very little influence over what that ultimate collaboration design is. That will change. And we have to be proactive and make sure that we're ahead of that and not just wait for it to change. We have to be part of that solution. But I don't think many architects or interior designers now can credibly go to a client and actually say, I can design space for you without there being an IT AV person with them to actually say, and this is how we're going to optimize the experience and everything that goes with that. So I think the opportunity is for integrated design and development, but we have to make that change. We can't expect it just to happen.
I really strongly agree with one particular point that Julian made, which is we have to be proactive. If you are the expert in this area, you have to present your expertise. You have to be sure that you are being as I hesitate to use the word forceful, but you do in fact have to be forceful when you're dealing with interior designers to be sure they understand the implications here are not just how the room looks. If you tell me I can't put a microphone there, the person who sits there will not be heard. You have to be as clear as possible, and you really have to present your expertise as something that's non-negotiable.
Nick, you guys, I mean, WeWork is fundamentally about spaces where people get work done. Are you looking at the way this situation has evolved and thinking, okay, how will we change things? How will we integrate technology differently going forward? Or are you just waiting to get back there?
We are looking proactive. Obviously, we're all a little bit limited by how much we can actually be in the spaces right now, right? But yeah, of course we are. What we're looking at right now, quite honestly, because the interior designers, the architects, and the safety professionals are very focused on distancing and things like airflow and making sure that rooms are big enough to accommodate people with a lower risk of infection of the virus. So while they're doing that, quite honestly, the conference room is the piece that I'm least focused on. I imagine what I think is going to happen is people will return to the workplace for sure. Will they return to the same situation where you pack 10 people into a room that was nominally designed for 8 to 10 and sit there for an hour and a half? I kind of doubt it. So the conference room itself is not the focus that we're looking at. It's more about how do you bring building level controls, system controls into a place where they can be touch free, where they can be operated by anyone, whether they're remote or on site. How do you do things like check-in? How do you do things like virtual assistance from your community manager? If you need to talk to a human being, how do you do that safely without exposing yourself in this sort of first wave? I think the conference room technology is going to be really, really important. But from my perspective, there's a lot of core infrastructure work that I've seen in some sites that needs development before the conference rooms are even the focus.
And I think, Brad, if I can add to what Nick's just said there, we are learning new things about this virus every single day, and that's dramatically changing the way we're thinking about how we go back to the workspace. So the recent studies are actually showing that touch and surface transmission is not necessarily as prevalent as we probably thought it was, but distancing, as far as how close we are to people that are actually talking, is probably a higher risk. And so we've got to be really careful that we don't suddenly make hard and fast decisions right now about how we're going to totally redesign the workspace and the technology that goes with that until we start to get better data and actually understand this thing. So I think in the short term, there's going to be some interim measures that we need to put in place to keep everyone safe and to make sure that we can gradually, and it will be a gradual reintroduction of people into the workspace. And what I'm hearing from customers is that, it could well be that not even by the fall, even late fall, that we might even have a partial reintroduction in certain major cities such as New York, for example. We might have 30-40% reintroduction by the end of the year, and it may well be that we're not even until the spring of next year before we get anywhere close to capacity. So there are some short-term measures, but we have to, my best advice really is, if the change that you're looking to make did not make sense as far as how people actually are going to collaborate and actually be effective pre-COVID, then the chances are you probably shouldn't make that investment anyway. So I think this is actually a real opportunity for us to really improve the way that we communicate and collaborate together and how space is utilized for everyone's benefit. And yes, meeting those short-term measures, but making sure that we're really building robust systems and processes and value moving forward. And I think that's what we'll see play out.
I think I don't want to belabor this question too much, but I, again, completely agree with that. I think the risks of making major overhauls right now, like doing full system refreshes, ripping out, or even tearing down walls in some cases to open up spaces, that seems like an overreaction. I totally understand where it comes from, but right now, while we're still learning about this literally brand new virus, the impact that we make on the physical environment that we built before COVID doesn't need to be intense. I think, as Julian said, the other thing I really agree with, if it didn't make sense before COVID, it doesn't make sense now. A lot of the trends that we were already observing and already sort of capitalizing on before COVID were about how do we make the workspace, less of a miserable environment for some people, when the overall drive up until then was pack as many people into the space as you possibly can, maybe hang a nice picture and put a pretty couch in the room so that it feels less terrible, but you're still trying to maximize space efficiency. And all the trends that we followed over the last couple of years are get people out of that environment, let them approach it in their own way, give them more of their own space, whether that's at home or a remote office. So yeah, that's a great point. If it didn't make sense before COVID-19, it probably doesn't make sense now.
Chuck, voice of the people, what do you got going for us?
Oh, we have a looming question that a lot of people want to hear the answer to. And this goes along with what we were just talking about. How does the AV integrator convince all the technology managers with BYOM and the Zoomers that a conference room is still needed? What are the room configurations or peripherals that will increase in demand and not go away?
Wow, great question.
Well, as an integrator, I could answer that, but actually, probably Nick should answer that, and then I'll make some comment on what he actually says.
That's a boy. I'm not a huge fan of the way the question is framed, only because I think it sets up more conflict between end users, tech managers, and the integrators and the consultants than I think there really needs to be. But how can you convince me that a conference room is still necessary? Show me a new idea. All of the ideas that are out there that I'm seeing right now that are being pitched to me, very few of them are really new, or very few of them really alter the way the room works or make it a more functional space. At its core, a meeting room has a very limited set of defined functionality, right? Um, the question, I think, is what can we add to that room, or what can we change about how the room operates that extends that functionality? Because the baseline assumption that people are going to want to sit in the same room with each other kind of contradicts the usefulness of the meeting room today, in my opinion. I'm super interested to hear what Julian has to say.
Well, I think this is an opportunity for all of us, and again, following my theme of cutting out the silos and really getting together and looking at the problem together, is let's be honest, despite all of our best endeavors in the AV industry over the last 20 years, we still have many thousands of conference spaces that are not delivering a great audio experience for remote participants, where we still have many tens of thousands of conference rooms that have very poor lighting for video and don't actually enable people to feel as though they are actually in the space. There are some real fundamentals about this connection, this human experience, that become even more important now, given that you're going to have more remote participants in that conference space than you had physically people in the space. And it changes the whole dynamic. So I think, and I agree with Nick, we need to show more innovation and we need to actually bring new ideas. And some of those are going to be how we integrate that technology into apps that we can actually automate processes so that we can walk into a conference room and through our own cell phone we could stop meetings and have a whole range of service delivery. So we're working on all that kind of stuff, but let's not forget about the basics. Let's make sure that as a remote participant I am given equal status of people physically in the room. I need to be seen, I need to be heard. I don't want to have disruption to the meeting through poor network performance. There's so many different things that if you think about the amount of money that organizations invest in real estate and fitting out buildings, we need to start probably putting some of that money into improving the overall experience that people remotely have when they become part of that meeting with certain people in the space and certain people remote. So I think this isn't all about, and I know where the question's coming from. It's like, are we all dumbing down? Is everyone just buying stuff off the web and using cloud video and everything gets cheap and there's no value for AV integrators? I believe the complete opposite. I think that the liberalization and democratization of these powerful applications is driving more people to want to use it, but also raising the bar of expectation of the overall experience people have. And so as long as we focus on that and we focus on where we are strong, but also bring new innovation, of which there's a huge amount of opportunity, then I think the AV integration community in partnership with our customers has a huge opportunity moving forward. But we may have to play with new partners and bring new ideas and concepts, as well as the traditional partners who are already evolving and changing their product offerings as well. So if the question was rooted in, is all the money going and there's no value and all that, I don't believe that to be true. But we do have to change and we do have to bring new ideas and concepts to our customers.
I do think Julian touched on software and applications, and I think that's one piece where a lot of integrators are sort of developing expertise now, and it hasn't been their core competency for a long time. That's a really good one to really focus on now. Look at software integrations. Look at what equipment you provide that has API access to other hardware or to other software. Figure out new ways to connect these systems together to add the functionality. And I think you will probably find that if you had a good relationship with tech managers and designers ahead of time before COVID, you probably have a good relationship with them now. Not many people, nobody really understands what to do right now. We're all sort of experimenting. So yeah, Julian has got it. Focus on software, make sure the in-room audio experience particularly is rock solid, and just do your best.
Chuck, do we have a security question? Because I think we'd be remiss if we didn't, briefly at least address the subject of now that this sort of hybrid, remote, various different tools and platforms coming together. What's the role of our professionals in securing these communications and these collaborative experiences? And either one of you can start to jump in on that one.
Yeah, we actually do have a security question. How do we address false Zoom security news or just false security news? And how can we push back on the non-believers?
That's an existential question. Look, from a security perspective, I think what I said right at the very beginning is crucial here. We've moved to a different security paradigm now. We're moving from fundamentally that client-server architecture and the different measures that we've had to secure data and access in that world, and we're moving fundamentally to a cloud-based architecture. And I think where we're seeing challenges in security is where people are in that transitionary period and there are holes in the overall infrastructure story. I'm a firm believer, if we're looking for belief, I am a firm believer that everything in the cloud is fundamentally more secure than everything in a client-server architecture world. We just need to put the right measures in place to ensure that we can actually have the right measures in place to manage applications in the cloud and what have you. So I think most of the issues, I mean, we've heard certain stories that are true about Zoom and certain stories that aren't true. They've moved quite aggressively to fix some of the user interface issues, which have been the cause of most of this, especially the Zoom bombing type things by just people being able to hack in and drop in. But ultimately, the architecture that the UCC, because this is what the panel is about, UCC, the fundamental cloud-based architecture for UCC, if we follow that and we have the right advice and the right services provided, of which AV integrators like us are now providing, we can help secure a future where we can deploy this aggressively at speed, securely for the users out. And let's face it, we also have to plan for the fact that the home LAN is now the frontier of our enterprise LAN. And that's a new dynamic that we have to deal with.
My short answer to that question is make friends with an InfoSec geek. I'm a big believer in cross-functional collaboration. And when it comes right down to it, there's certain things about Zoom security that I, as an AV professional, was very quickly able to diagnose and say, this is nonsense. This is not a concern. There's very simple measures we can implement to prevent Zoom bombing. But then you get into things like the end-to-end encryption and their claims that they made about how it's encrypted and what server tokens are being stored in China. I'm not saying I don't understand it at all. I'm saying I'm very glad I have friends who are information security geeks who I could sit and talk to about this. Don't feel like you have to one-man army it. Find people who understand these things better and talk it through with them.
Chuck, we're about 3 minutes to the end of this. I want to give the audience another chance here.